technology.
Welcome to another episode of the Integrate This EdTech podcast here. Again, on our hiatus this summer, David and I still find a couple of times that we managed to get together. Of course, we were together this summer at ISTE, which led to an interview that we had this last week, Manuel Herrera. And we are fortunate enough to be able to pick up another guest this week. And so David and I are really thankful to have Jethro Jones join us here for our conversation today. Jethro is an author, a podcaster, a speaker on education leadership topics, and I'll definitely throw up some of his contact information, website, podcast link, that sort of stuff here as we go on. So be sure to look for those links here. But Jethro was another one of these people that when you go to a conference such as ISTE and you're able to network with different speakers, different vendors, and people you just meet on the convention floor somewhere. And I think, Jethro, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we met you actually at a coffee shop where one of the vendors, and I think we'll get into School AI a little bit here, was hosting a coffee for people to stop by and, check out their product a little bit and talk about their experiences with it. And then we followed up and got to meet you in the expo hall as well. So just kind of one of those great connections that we were able to make along the way. So really, again, as we kick things off here, I just want to thank you for joining us. Appreciate your time and any of the advice and insight you can share with us along the way too.
Cool, man. I'm honored to be here, and thanks so much for the opportunity.
Yeah. So let's, if David, I'll kick it off here if you don't mind. I know you have an extensive education background, but give us a little bit of what your education journey kind of has been to go from, I know you were a principal at one point, into now doing much more of your own consulting business. But, how did you get to that point?
Yeah, it really goes back to my first year teaching when I was a language arts teacher, and my oldest daughter was just born and she has Down syndrome. And I have 3 brothers and 3 sisters. And we always talked about like whose kid would walk first and whose kid would be most advanced. And, we had all this sibling rivalry going on. And as soon as my oldest daughter was born, she had this diagnosis of Down syndrome. I realized that all that comparison and competition, it just didn't matter. And all of that just immediately disappeared. And the reason why I shared that perspective is that it made me realize for the students that were there in front of me, each of them is a unique individual, and each of them has their own gifts, their own challenges, their own abilities. And if we look at kids as this lump, this group, then we're going to miss out on who each student really is as a human being. And from that point on, I said, all right, my focus is going to be on seeing each one of my students as their own person and helping them develop to whatever their own potential is, and help them achieve that. And I carried that in from being a English teacher, teaching middle school and high school language arts, to district level, working in the tech department, to the curriculum department where I went after that, to being an assistant principal, to being a principal, all the way up through being a principal of a prison school and a homeschool program in Fairbanks, Alaska. And recognizing that even kids who were incarcerated, even kids with disabilities, kids who are English language learners, kids who are normal everyday kids, they're all unique. They all have their own thing. And so my focus really has been, how do I help each student rise to whatever their level is and achieve what they were put on this earth to do? And that's what I try to do from everything that I do with educators now to coaching and supporting leaders. That's what I do.
Really sounds like when I hear you say that we in our podcast focus a lot on education technology and its applications and uses in the classroom. But, I think David and I would both agree that it really comes back to the relationships that you can create with those students, or in the case of the, maybe teachers you're working with or principals you're working with, that if you don't have that human connection first, it's not going to matter what comes afterwards.
Exactly. And the technology is great, but we should never have technology for technology's sake. We have to have a reason and a purpose behind it that helps us get at why we're implementing this. And I'm a huge fan of technology. I've been teaching about technology ever since 2007 when I started Techno Thursdays. Every Thursday after school, I would just teach the other teachers how to use technology in the classroom, which is crazy because I didn't know what I was doing. I was just making stuff up as I went along, but I was good at it from my early years of teaching, and so I just started helping others, and I think it's really important. But you can't ever forget what you're really trying to do and who you're really trying to serve. And all too often at conferences like ISTE and the ISTE affiliate conferences, we get focused on the tool and we forget about what it's actually there for, which is to improve the lives of the students that we're serving.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
When you were mentioning like the individual students and things like that, is there some specific examples that you have, like things that you learned along the way, either from teaching or when you were principal, your any of that time that you had working with schools, where you've got an example of like someone really shining maybe as an individual or having an opportunity to do so?
Yeah. Oh boy. Are you ready? Because there's a
Here's
lot.
here's where I think we could get you going for a long
Yeah.
time, I feel
No
like,
kidding.
right?
So I'm gonna tone it down though, and I'm just gonna share a couple of examples. I already shared the example of my own daughter with Down syndrome being way below the advances in AI that allow her to be at in a grade level class with her capability level conversation happening with an AI chatbot. Like I was there at ISTE with School AI. Absolutely incredible that an 18-year-old girl can be with her same age peers and have interactions about the topics that the 18-year-olds are talking about, but have it at her level so that she can engage and be part of that conversation is incredibly powerful. I just love it. And that's the kind of thing that like just gets my heart going. A second story was this young woman named Kayla Armstrong. And Kayla, who's an adult now, if you are around, I want to know what you're doing. So reach out to me because this girl was brilliant when she was a seventh grader in my class many years ago. And I can only imagine what she's doing now. But she came into my class and I said, look, I can tell just from talking to you and reading your first writing thing that you already know everything that I could possibly teach you in this class. So what we're going to do is you have to meet certain standards. I'm pretty sure you've already met them, but I just want some demonstration of it, but I want you to be at your own level. And so I took the things that she was interested in. We made a unique, individualized, personalized plan for her that was just for her, and nobody else was doing it. And she did her own work all year long, totally independent of everybody else in class. And I didn't know that this was even okay. I just did it because I thought it was the right thing to do. And this girl still learned a ton and was writing at like a collegiate level in seventh grade, and it was very impressive. And I love seeing that. And the third final story, this happened my last year as a principal of a middle school in Alaska, and it was incredible. We did this program called Synergy, where the students were able to do passion projects basically, and the goal was to uh, solve a problem that makes the world better, and they could define all those terms. And so these girls wanted to teach second grade and third grade students how to do cheer, soccer, and volleyball. So they figured out how to go over to the other school, get permission to bring the kids over to our school in 40 below degree weather, by the way, have them get all dressed and then take off all their winter clothes, do these activities, be safe about it, and then go back over. Now, we kept track of the standards that these girls passed off. They exceeded so many middle school standards, then went up to high school and exceeded standards there. And here's the kicker. What they learned how to do, they came to me and said, Mr. Jones, we want to expand this. And we expanded it and got these boys to do it also, but we've learned that the boys are not good at this. They're not mature enough. They're not ready. How do we fire the boys from our team without making them feel like they're not worthwhile and not valuable? Most adults have no idea how to do something like that. And these girls learned how to do that in middle school. That's not even a standard, but that is a compassionate life skill that will serve these women well for the rest of their lives. And I'm honored to have been able to get a little tiny glimpse of that.
Yeah. Now, really cool. It kind of almost makes me think, you're talking about these time periods before, AI was, generative AI as we've known it in the last year and a half or so, it was not available to you at that time. But I can only imagine a couple of the things, like when I think about whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini, or whether it's one of the more educationally growing AI platforms like School AI, is that some of the things that I think that it offers teachers and students the ability to do is to kind of create those personalized learning experiences. And I think, like you mentioned, both with your daughter and with Kayla, it's not just to accommodate students, in certain ways, but it can also be used to accelerate learning for students wherever they're at and bring them to that greater level. And then, also, to be able to develop some of those project base or those passion type projects, that AI, I think, can really be an effective tool and assistant for. What do you think? It sounds like you did a great job without it, but just imagine all of the other places that you could have gone had you had those tools.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing is that making experiences that are unique to each student is incredibly time consuming. And especially for teachers to be able to do that, it takes a lot of energy and a lot of effort to do that. And with the advancements in AI that I've like, so AI right now is really, it's not as advanced as a lot of people think it is. This technology has essentially been around for at least a decade, but because it's in a chatbot, it looks like it's a product and it looks like it's doing something that is more than it is. And so a lot of these capabilities have existed, but you had to be a super nerd to know how to use it and integrate it, right? And so now it's so easy because you just go into the chatbot and you do the little things and then you get your information back. You get things taken care of. So I've been doing automation type things for years, for my whole career. And that's how I survived. My first year teaching, I realized how much it sucks to grade papers. And so I stopped grading papers. I didn't stop assigning them, but I stopped grading them because I knew that one, students writing just for me was absolutely pointless. So I had kids start writing blogs. And this was even before Blogspot existed. So there wasn't like, there wasn't an easy way to do it. But we figured out a way to make it work. And then when Blogspot came, we started using that. And then I certainly got in trouble because, you shouldn't be putting kids out there online. Now, to be clear, I did use pseudonyms so that they weren't putting their real names out there. But times have certainly changed a lot since then. So I've used automation type tools a lot to help make these things possible. But I mean, if I were in a classroom today, personalization would be the number one thing. And it would be very little focused on what I got my first day in the classroom, which was there are your books and teach out of those books. That would not be the case now because these tools make it so easy to not do that and to provide unique experiences for students. And so I didn't talk about all the technology that I use to make these things happen with my students, but there was a lot. We even developed our own app to do that, called Picker, so that kids could go to different places. Because if you've ever used Power School or Skyward, you know they don't like it when kids are not in the same place every day for the whole entire semester. And so we created an ad hoc scheduling tool called Picker that allows you to go in uh, and make ad hoc classes for students so they can be grouped across the whole entire school, not just small groups within a teacher's classroom, but you can have, 50 different groups in your school because you have that many adults. And so, the availability of AI now is really powerful and can definitely seed a lot of these things happening, which I think is exceptionally cool.
Yeah, no offense to Harry Wong, but that was kind of like my day one stuff. Here's the routine, and you drill and you practice that until it's ingrained in the heads of kids and teachers, right? But boy, I think today there's just too many different possibilities. No day is going to be the same. How can you get into that same routine? But no, I think that's a great way to approach it for sure.
Yeah. I think it's really important to be able to be flexible and to go where the needs take you rather than saying, like, here's one of my big pet peeves. Uh, English teachers think that they can only teach English and that the only English that counts as being taught is in their classroom. I just think that's terrible. That's no good for kids. That's no good for the teachers. It's no good for anybody, but that's how we do it. And so, in order to get my teachers to see that they could do something different during the synergy time that I mentioned, we had to actually take it out of their classroom time, because when it was part of their content area time, they thought, well, I'm an English teacher. This is an English class. I have to teach English. But that's not actually the case. You are a teacher of students. Here's something that's really fascinating is I lived in Russia for 2 years. I did a mission for my church there, and I learned the Russian language. And the coolest thing from learning Russian was that I learned that when a teacher says that she teaches, she doesn't say, I teach fourth grade or I teach English. She says, I teach a subject. I'm sorry, I teach students to the subject. So instead of saying, I teach a subject to students, she says, I teach students to the subject, like she's taking them on a field trip to each individual subject. Instead of saying, I teach math to eighth graders, she says, I teach eighth graders to math. The language is structured that if you said, I teach eighth grade, it doesn't make any sense because you can't teach eighth grade. You can only teach humans. You can't teach a subject. You can only teach humans to that subject. And I just love that image of you actually taking the kids, physically taking them to the subject and saying, this is what I'm teaching you to this subject. I think that's so powerful.
I don't think you can get much more student centered than that right there in the way that you phrase that.
Yeah. And that is built into the language that they speak on a regular basis. That has power. That has meaning for sure.
Yeah.
Can we talk a little bit about your podcast and how that got started? Maybe you could kind of give the viewers the name of the podcast, a synopsis of it, and how you got it off the ground.
Yeah, so my podcast is called Transformative Principle. I actually have several podcasts now, but that one is the flagship one. So transformativeprinciple.org. If you are interested in any kind of leadership in the education space, this is the podcast to listen to, because here's my secret little hack. Remember how I said that everybody's like path is unique to them? Well, that's true for me too. And I wanted to know how to be the best principal that I possibly could be. And I was not satisfied with the professional development that I was getting from my school leaders in my district. And so I said, there's got to be a podcast out here about how to be a better principal. And there wasn't. And I was really interested in transforming education. So I called it Transformative Principle. Now, I just started asking people, hey, you're a great principal. Can you teach me how to be a better principal? That's literally all I did. And in fact, I was so nervous that I wouldn't get anybody to come on the show, and that I wouldn't be able to find people, that one, I offered to pay the first principal that I interviewed, and she was like, actually, you should know this. That's an ethics violation. You can't really like pay me to do this. So I have ethics in my school district, and I would get in trouble if I accepted payment. And I was like, oh, well, that's new. So I should know about that. And then the second piece is that I split my interviews up over 2 episodes because I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to get anybody. Well, that was over 10 years ago and over 700 episodes ago. And I still have people constantly reaching out saying, I want to be on your show. I still constantly find people that I want to talk to and learn from. Even though I'm not a principal anymore, I still can find people who can give great insight into what people are going through. And so I just started asking people, and I just kept doing that. And I haven't missed a week in that whole time. Don't take vacations. I just do it over and over and over again. That has eventually led to me creating podcasts for other people. And I've gotten over a dozen podcasts into the top 10% because I've figured out how to create good content and coach people to create good content themselves as well. And I really do believe that everybody should have a podcast because it's powerful to get your voice out there and express what you're learning, what you're thinking about, and what you're interested in. So I encourage everybody to do that. So once again, transformativeprincipal.org, go check it out. If you go through that and listen, you will hear every problem I faced as a principal, because here's the other trick. I just asked people to solve my problems. I said, here's a problem. How can you help me solve this? What can you teach me about it? And that's what I did. And people seem to like it. They still listen to it. And I regularly get comments back saying, this really helped. I appreciate it. So if I may, real quick, in September, we're doing a focus on literacy, because literacy is a big deal. And it is, to me, the key that that unlocks everything else. If you can read effectively, then you can do anything else, and you can learn anything else. And so it's the most important skill that we teach. And well, I think it's the second most important skill. I think the first most important skill is teaching people to be good human beings. But that's not a content area, unfortunately. And so all of September, we're doing a whole bunch of episodes across my whole entire podcast network about literacy. And so we're going to be talking about teaching kids to read, about teaching kids to love reading, about AI literacy, and all kinds of different kinds of literacies as well. So going to be a really powerful thing all about literacy the month of September. So
And
something to
what
look
great
forward to.
timing, back to school,
Back to school.
Um,
September is National Literacy Month. I don't know
yep.
if you knew that. I didn't know that.
No,
I
I didn't
just
know
learned about that.
that. But David and I both work our day jobs in ed tech cooperatives in different regions of Minnesota, where we reach literally thousands of educators. And amongst those would definitely be, not just reading and literacy teachers, but also other educators that, it's not just the English language arts teacher that needs to be teaching literacy and the skills of reading
That's right.
across the board. It's all content areas, right?
Absolutely.
So we would love if you would share any of that with us. We'd be happy to forward that on to staff in the districts that each of us work with. So
Awesome.
that would be awesome. I'm going to pivot you again here really quick here. You bring people on your show to ask them to solve your problems here. So you're on our show. You've got two guys here that work in different parts of the state, but we come together here to try to produce a weekly podcast as well. We've been doing it for about a year. I don't know, David, maybe 20 episodes ish, give or take, that we've done.
I think we have more than that.
Full ones. We sometimes split them up into smaller segments, but what advice would you give to a couple of people who've been doing it for about a year, but really want to try to expand and grow and make a better product for the people that are watching or listening?
Yeah. So first of all, I told you my first secret, which is make great content for me. And so when I'm curious and I'm interested in what is going on and what I'm asking, I do a better job in that situation. The second piece of that is make content that is beneficial and useful to the people that you're trying to reach. And so, you know, it's easy to get stuck on the vanity metrics of how many downloads you get and all that kind of stuff. And what really matters is the quality of the people who are listening. Are they people who want to reach out and talk with you and engage with you about what you're doing? And if you're not creating content that's encouraging people to do that, then that's something you got to look at and say, how can we get people to engage more and be part of what we're doing? That they're not just listeners, but that, as one of my favorite podcast hosts, Adam Curry, says, that they are producers of our show as well. So I, all the time, I have listeners and guests and former guests who say, hey, this is someone you should interview on your show. This is something that I need help with. Here's a question that I have. And so for many of my shows, it was not just my question, but it was also one of my listeners' questions. Or when I started coaching, it was my clients' questions that they would say, how do we deal with this situation? I mean, especially during COVID and over the last year and a half with AI type stuff, people have been asking a lot of questions. And so I've created a lot of content around and interviewed great people around these ideas that people really need help with. And sometimes you just need somebody else's perspective, and that really helps a lot. And other times, you need to go your own way and figure out your own thing. But having somebody else say, this is what we're experiencing, is really valuable. So for you two specifically, what I would say is reach out to the people that are watching. And if you're watching this and you have not reached out to Dave and Jeremy, you need to reach out and say, hey, this is why I like your show. So that's my call to action for everybody who's on here watching this. If you are coming back and watching this again, let these two know why you're watching the show so that they can have a better idea of how to serve you most effectively.
I think
Awesome.
that's great because we have, I mean, sometimes it can feel like, Jeremy and I are obviously always together and creating the content, and then it gets pushed out to the web, so it's and then from there it's kind of like, you don't know what kind of impact your reach you're having outside of some, statistical metrics that YouTube gives you, for example. And so yeah, I think that's really really great. And probably even on our end, we could be asking more questions of viewers that we maybe know on a personal level, because I know not every viewer you're going to know personally, but getting that type of information I think would be helpful.
So I've also done surveys of my audience where I ask them who they are, like anonymous surveys, right? So age, gender, other demographics, positions, things like that. So I've learned that about 2/3 of my audience are current principals, and about 25% are district level, and then everybody else is aspiring or former administrators. And I think that's helpful for me to know because I know who I'm talking to. But then here's the other thing. I have a few people in my mind that I'm always thinking about when I'm recording shows, and I try to speak directly to them and give the things that they would need in their situation, and that's really helped a lot as well. Um,
And one of the taglines that I noticed on your website, it was "Stop putting out fires and start leading." Right. So how do you take that philosophy and incorporate that into your as an author, as a podcaster, as a education leadership coach, and kind of mold everything around that here?
yeah. So this is so important to me because all we do in every position in schools, especially, is we just run around putting out fires. Like that's all we do all the time. Every principal that I talk to is like, oh yeah, it's just so busy. Life is so stressful. There's so much going on. And I'm just constantly putting out fires. That's what everybody says. And if you instead start leading instead of putting out those fires, you start thinking about a long-term approach to whatever you're doing. So let's go back to the teaching example. I'm not trying to teach kids how to write a 5-paragraph essay. I'm trying to teach them how to communicate. So if I'm so narrowly focused on them learning this 5-paragraph essay, then I'm really just wasting time because that's not even that important, number one. And number two, there's so much more to what they need to be able to do in life than write a 5-paragraph essay. They need to be able to communicate effectively. So, one, it involves looking at what your long term goals are and what you really want out of whatever it is that you're spending your time doing. Now, if you thrive on being busy and it makes you feel really important uh and that's like what you want to do, cool, you can be really busy and be focused on that and be solving problems that show up each day. But if you want to leave a legacy, if you want to leave an impact, if you want to create something that's going to be beneficial long after you're gone, you want to think long term about how we can make things change and work in a way that it's actually going to lead to that, which forces you to stop putting out fires and really be a leader. And so, in each of my schools where I was principal, we created a community garden. And it wasn't something that I was like, this is the thing that I'm going to do every time I go to a school. It was like, how do we get people to start thinking long term? Well, let's start doing things that require that is impossible for us to speed up, basically. Like, you cannot speed up growing. You can with greenhouses to a certain extent, but at some point you just have to wait. And there's a lot of time where you're not doing anything. You just have to wait for the fruits to produce. And so we started a community garden at every school that I was at because that is an important thing to do, and it helps you think more long term. And there are, like, when you create the garden, there's that assignment of how do we design the garden that is like a good learning opportunity, but you only get to do that once. The rest of it is boring, is repeatable, is simple. You know, we got to plant the seeds. And in Utah, you can't plant until the snow's off the ochres. And so you just wait until that time comes and then you plant them outside in the open air. You can start them in the greenhouse beforehand, but really it comes down to thinking long term and not thinking that every problem is an emergency. And when I first became an assistant principal, one of the things people told me was that I would always have kids lining up outside my door. I said, no, I won't. I'm not going to have kids line up outside my door for discipline. That is not how it's going to work. The second thing they said was, you're going to be running all over the school because there's this thing called an owl squad, which was when somebody's in distress, they go on the loudspeaker and say, so-and-so's in distress and we need an owl squad to this place. And everybody's supposed to run to that place. I said, I am never running in this school unless it is for a race. That's the only reason I'm running. And so I never
In
ran.
Minnesota, as a track coach,
Yeah.
and we can't get outside. I tell kids it's okay to run in the hallways.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. However, during school, when there is intensity happening, running only makes everybody nervous. It doesn't help. And so I said, I'm never going to run. And I didn't run. Anytime there was an issue, kid thrash in a classroom, I refuse to run. I'm going to walk calmly and I'm going to stay in control of my faculties because I'm not just going to put out this fire. And we had a lot of those situations and it was tough sometimes, but it's important to think long term and not just think about what's right in front of your face, but think about how this is going to impact other decisions down the road.
Great. So long term, what's up for you? I mean, I know you've got a couple of books that are out there. You've got, multiple podcasts that you've been working on. What are some of your long term plans here?
Yeah, it's crazy because my short term right now, it feels like there's a lot of fires and it's very stressful. And I keep going back to this idea of I need to think more long term. So I focus on three things: coaching, creating, and clarifying. Coaching, we should have put this at the beginning. This would have set up the conversation much better. Oh, well. Coaching is helping people get better. Creating is creating content for people. Podcasts, blogs, writing books, speaking, all that kind of stuff goes into that category. And then third is clarifying, which is anything else that I can think of that I can do. And so we mentioned School AI. I'm consulting with School AI right now to help them develop and do cool things with students and teachers and AI. And it's wonderful. I love it. That's considered clarifying because I'm not really creating anything, not really coaching, but I'm finding a simple solution to a complex problem. And that's really what that comes down to is how do I find simple solutions to the tough things that are happening? And that's what I try to do. So that's my long-term thing. I'm also a doctoral student right now, which, by the way, totally sucks, but I also love it. So it's really frustrating. So we won't go into all that, but trying to think long-term of coaching, creating, and clarifying. If I can keep my stuff in those three buckets, I feel like I'm in pretty good shape.
What do you find to do to keep you motivated and interested in those different things that you're doing? I mean, I can't imagine that it's always easy to wake up and say, I'm going to be creative today. You know, that there's got to be some sort of motivation that keeps you driving towards that all the time.
Yeah, it's interesting. That is actually not hard for me to be motivated about. It's not hard for me to be creative. It is hard for me to do the boring things of scheduling time to write and sticking to that schedule. Like, I can distract myself with writing all the time, but when it's time for me to write, it's very easy for me to find other things to do. Isn't that fascinating? So yeah, it's interesting how that works. So finding a motivation, to me, it's really about discipline and about which I'm feeling exceptionally terrible at right now, by the way. So this is good therapy for me myself to get better at. Um, it is difficult to stay disciplined, and like I haven't sent out a newsletter to my email audience in over a month, just because I haven't felt like I want to do it and I'm not being disciplined in it. So when I'm disciplined, I do a great job. When I'm not disciplined, then it sucks. There's some truth for you.
Good. We're giving you a little therapy here too, maybe.
Yeah, no kidding.
I got kind of a fun question for you here. This is if you could, since you have your podcast, well, several podcasts, if you could interview any person that you haven't interviewed, and either dead or alive, doesn't matter, who would that be, and what would you like to interview them about? Put you on the spot a little bit.
Yeah. So I think that my best answer for that one is I believe that every single person has something truly remarkable that makes them unique and special. And I would love it if I could just all day long just interview people about that and ask them about what in their life got them to the point where they're at and what success looks like to them and how they have achieved that success. And that's not a cop out answer because I truly do believe that every single person does have something that makes them special. And like, would it be cool to interview like someone famous like Abraham Lincoln or George Washington? Yeah, that would be cool. But the amount of research I would have to do to make that a worthwhile interview does not sound exciting. But I believe that I could interview anybody and find something unique and special about them that is a powerful, compelling story that somebody else would find value in listening to. And that's what I would love to do.
I actually like that answer. It's a good answer.
Yes.
Because I think that comes down to like there's nothing like I think people put a lot of stock in famous people and stuff like that, for whatever particular reason or their personal reasons. And I think that it's actually um, refreshing to point out that everybody is human as well. So like everybody has their own unique story, and it's Abraham Lincoln is this as you used as an example is storied, and there's so many different things about him that people have recounted over hundreds of years now almost, you know so since the 1800s. But there's people alive today that you could interview that are just as important, just as meaningful. So
And super unknown. Like nobody knows who they are, but there are people that you both know who are inspiring, amazing people, and their stories deserve to be shared as well. And yes, there are famous people. We have room in our history books for only so many people, right? And not everybody gets as much due in those history books as they should. But like, there's a guy here who used to live in my neighborhood. He passed away several years ago, and people still talk about the good things that he did and how he blessed the lives of other people. Like he just did it last week. But it's been years since this guy passed away, and people still talk about him on a regular basis. Like he's still here, and that's incredible. That is leaving a legacy. That is really being a good human being and blessing the lives of those around you. Like, but nobody knows who this guy is, and
Yeah.
he wouldn't want anybody to anyway. But he's a powerful, awesome human being.
Which is part of the reason why everyone needs a podcast, right? Then it is
Exactly.
there.
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I kind of feel like I one of the things I love to watch on YouTube is Sean Evans and Hot Ones. I don't know if you've ever seen Hot Ones on there before, but he gets to the end of an interview with someone and he says, "Okay, you've got this camera, this camera, this camera. Why don't you tell everyone what it is that you're working on, what it is that we should be looking for, that's coming from you here in the near future."
Okay, well, I did already tease it, which is the literacy month. In September, we're doing this big promotion with Reading is Fundamental, and we really want to make sure that as many people as possible can learn more about literacy and reading and how vital that is to uh, everybody's success in their life. So, literacy.bpodcast.network is where you should go for that. Literacy.bpodcast.network. That's BE as in beyond education.
And we will definitely link that in the show notes, and make sure that that gets out to people here as well too.
are there any socials that you have that people can follow you at as well?
Yeah, I'm at Jethro Jones pretty much everywhere. So would love to have you give me a follow. And seriously, if you're listening to this, when you listen to the end and you don't reach out to these two guys, that's messed up. So reach out to them and say, this is why I like your show. Because they need to hear it, because they're slogging away at this and they need some motivation to go out on their own.
That's right.
We appreciate the confidence boost. So
Yeah, well, we really appreciate your time here today, Jethro, and all of the insight, the therapy, and the experience that you're able to bring. So, good luck and keep on doing what you're doing too, because it's certainly valuable to a lot of people out there. So, thank you for that too.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me, and appreciate what you two are doing. I know it's not easy, but it's worth it. So good for you.
well, thanks for watching, everybody. Hopefully you got some great insights from our interview with Jethro. It was great meeting him at ISTE and continuing our conversation with him over messages and into this the podcast here. And I think one of the things that I took away from it, and that he continued to almost seems like his mantra, is that there's a important emphasis that can be placed on each individual person. I think that came up time and time again about the importance of each person, but also the abilities of everybody, and not selling yourself short and giving yourself an opportunity to show what you're made of, whether that be a podcast or whatever it might be. I think that was one of the greatest takeaways for me, and something to reflect on moving forward. So, Jeremy, if you had any thoughts.
Yeah, and I don't be afraid to reach out to us. We would like to um, share stories, to share topics, to share points of view that you think are important too. And if we can help amplify your voice in any way along those lines too, we would love to be able to do that.
Yeah, and the one thing about our field is that we know educators have a lot of stories, and they could be sharing things, and um, many of them do, but probably more at like the micro level. So, if anybody wanted to get their voice out about certain stories that they think would help others, I think that would be great too. So, um, anybody could come on for an interview, right? That's kind of how I feel
Right.
after talking with Jethro.
I do too. All right. Thanks, everyone. We
Thank-
will be back again sometime.
Yep.
We don't have a next show planned yet, but look for it to drop sometime again this summer.